so excited. This is something I've been wanting to talk about for a really long time, but to be completely honest, I didn't think it was my place to talk about. I thought that, I needed to leave that up to the ADHD dietitians, the ADHD nutritionists, my expertise is occupational therapy, is sensory health, is sensory therapy, somatic therapy, that whole realm. That's not my place to talk about it. But really, when it comes to nervous system regulation, strengthening our nervous system, strengthening our senses, you really can't leave out gut health. And while I just want to go ahead and say I am not a registered dietitian, and that is not anywhere of my area of expertise, so I just want to share my journey. I feel like there might be a lot that you can take away to I feel like I took the very long route in figuring out how to help my gut health being an ADHDer. So I guess starting just a little bit at what my journey looked like, it really was around the same time when I was first learning about sensory therapy. I had hit my rock bottom. I was learning about sensory therapy. I had been in other counseling and different things. And this is when I was starting to just really put my nervous system, put just my overall health, just starting to prioritize it. And so this is when I started, I remember one of the first documentaries I watched was the juicing documentary on Netflix. I don't know if anybody else remembers those. And I watched just a few. I remember watching all of those health and nutrition documentaries on Netflix about just different things that were bad out there for you, like GMOs and those kind of things. But anyways, yeah, so I was probably about 20-ish years old, and I started really starting to prioritize my health, being more careful about my diet, trying to eat better. One thing about me that I will say too is when it comes to a diet, I am not, just being an ADHDer, I am not a person that likes specific diets. It's just never been for me. It just creates more stress and anxiety for me, which just makes me, freeze, puts me into that freeze state, makes me into that flight state where I just want to run from it. I want nothing to do with it. So for me, a lot of it has just been, I'll share my strategies and what I do instead. 20 years old, just really starting to dive deep into nutrition, just learning just more about my food. I didn't really know anything when it came to artificial dyes, red dye, yellow dye, all of those different things, GMO, just artificial ingredients in general, and just all of those different things. I was starting from the beginning. And so for me, just going through my whole health journey, going through just working on strengthening my nervous system from a sensory point of view and doing all of those things. There were still a few things health-wise. While I had huge improvements there, when it came to my attention, my focus, my hyperactivity, impulsivity, anxiety, all of those things, I had night and day difference. But there was still some lingering symptoms that I had and that I could not get rid of. And for the life of me, could not figure out what it was. And so, I had heard things like IBS, and then reading about the symptoms and talking to other people that had it, I was oh no, I don't have symptoms like that. That couldn't be it. Maybe I had a couple, but it seems very minor. I definitely don't think I had full blown IBS, or at least that's what I thought. And so the one thing to know when it comes to just gut health, and why I also prioritize it and became so important to prioritize it after learning about sensory therapy and learning about our nervous systems and how it works, is our gut health is specifically tied to our brain health. So how healthy our gut is, how properly we are digesting, able to digest nutrients, that it directly impacts our brain health. So our focus, our attention, anxiety, just all the different things. And so, or not some would say, my doctor would say we're minor and not anything to, be of a concern, and would kind of blow it off and just be oh, there's nothing to worry about. It's nothing, you're fine, you're healthy. And so I would just have, just sometimes have some stomach issues, nothing too serious, would sometimes break out, just have some skin things going on. The big one though for me was energy brain fog. And so of course this is something, being an ADHD, growing up ADHD, that I had always experienced. So I kind of, just put it on my ADHD and just the way that my brain was structured, I didn't necessarily put it onto my digestion and my gut. And so, especially because it had improved too. And so my way of saying it, of looking at it too, is it had improved, but I was still like, where it used to be down here, it was still up here, but I was still experiencing, you know, some low energy at times, still experiencing some brain fog during different times. And yes, like sensory strategies would help me, but it was still there. And so I was having all of these symptoms that were, you know, a lot of people should be like, oh, that's nothing, like you are fine, like, you know, that just comes with age, that's just, you know, a normal part, we all experience that, kind of just brushing it off. And so it wasn't until I learned about a little something called Candida overgrowth that everything finally clicked for me. And so this is the one thing that, one of the big takeaways, and one of the, hopefully the things that will save you time from going on that long rabbit hole of seeing all the different doctors, trying all these different diets, doing all these different things to kind of figuring out what that source is. Okay, so some symptoms of Candida overgrowth. Candida is a fungus. It's a form of yeast that lives throughout our bodies. And so if anybody is watching The Last of Us, I know, I especially was freaking out after watching The Last of Us because that has to do with the whole fungal infection. If you haven't seen it, it's a great show. I'm currently hooked to it. But anyways, got sidetracked. So some symptoms of Candida overgrowth are just number one, feeling tired and worn down. So especially you can think of how that would impact attention. So anybody with a dysregulated nervous system that feels just difficulty focusing, that brain fog, fatigued. So that is one big symptom. And of course that's so broad, like a lot of these are. Digestive issues, so bloating, constipation, diarrhea, gas, just different things like that. And then just also poor memory, lack of focus, like I mentioned, any skin issues, whether it's just breakouts, eczema, rashes, just popping up on your body randomly, and irritability, mood swings, anxiety, depression are some other ones. And so of course, a lot of these, if you look it up, they're just more broad symptoms. So it's, you know, a lot of people would look at that and be like, well, there's a chance I could have it. But I will say the one main symptom that I read about and that I had heard because I had met with a holistic doctor back when I was like 20 or 21. And I remember her pointing it out to me, but also again, like knowing nothing about Candida overgrowth at the time and didn't really know that it meant, but also just a signal that this is something that, you know, my body had, I've had this for a very long time. It wasn't just something that popped up. And so it's something called oral thrush. And so one way of looking at, or one way of seeing if there's any Candida overgrowth in your body is just looking at the color of your tongue. And when you go on Google, for a lot of you, the Google pictures are going to be a lot more severe. And so I will tag a picture of what my thrush used to look like, and you'll just see it's just like a light white coat or a lighter colored coat on your tongue rather than it being like a deep pink colored tongue that shows like that shows health, that shows less Candida. So that is just like one symptom to look for. And so Candida overgrowth. Then my next question was like, okay, well, what led to the Candida overgrowth in my body? Like what causes that? And then of course, one of the main causes of it that I found just from research was stress on our body. So of course, being ADHD, having a dysregulated nervous system is essentially just stress, your nervous system being in a stress state. Small, so not very specifically, but just like generally lightly speaking. And so, of course, I had experienced, my nervous system had just been on this high stress my entire life. So that would go to make sense what could have led to me experiencing this Candida overgrowth in my body. And just some other things that it impacted was my scalp. I always had really dry scalp for a long time. And so, and just dry scalp, and then just, dandruff? I had just a lot of dandruff is always something that I've had on and off, also signs of Candida overgrowth in our body. And so again, what happens when we have Candida overgrowth is it can lead to two things. So IBS is one, so irritable bowel syndrome. But if you go into look what causes IBS, a lot of times it is something called SIBO. small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And so, yeah, so hopefully the dots are starting to connect. And so that is when I was like, okay, this is when the big thing clicked, the super important thing clicked for me, is like I had been doing all of these things, you know, trying to eat healthy, trying to take all of these supplements. But what SIBO is, one big thing that happens during SIBO is that your intestine isn't properly absorbing nutrients. So even though I was trying to give my body all of these nutrients, it wasn't absorbing them properly. And because of the Candida overgrowth, because of, which was leading to the SIBO and different things too. And so again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a dietitian. This is purely from my research, but hopefully this will just help you know the questions to ask whenever you go talk to your doctor. I know for me, I couldn't afford, you know, to go to a doctor who could run all the tests, do all the different things. So at the time I couldn't do that. And so I know for others that are in that similar situation, it's just nice to have, you know, some shortcuts, and even just knowing what to ask, what to look for. Because again, for me, a lot of times when I went and asked questions to my doctor, I would just get brushed off, blown off, and wasn't taken seriously, and just didn't know the specific things to ask for. So now my next steps would be to talk to your doctor, talk about getting, there's Candida home tests, talk to him about the Candida overgrowth, and then you can also ask for a SIBO test. And so there's a SIBO breath test where they can actually test for SIBO too, to see if that might be one of the cause for all of these symptoms. And then that is what led me into my journey of just the low FODMAP diet, which is when I also realized that a lot of food that I thought were healthy weren't actually, you know, good for my specific digestion, and it led to me doing. And so before just even talking about diets and different things like that, I guess my first recommendation would be to do an elimination diet. And so this is something that you can do at home, you can do, and it's, you know, essentially free. You don't have to pay for someone. Of course, I always recommend going to a registered dietitian, going to someone who can lay out the steps, make this super, super easy for you. But if not, you can just do an elimination diet. If you Google, it'll tell you exactly how to do it, because that will show you exactly what foods are triggering to your digestive system. And so what foods are not being properly digested by your digestive system. And so I just wanted to get on here to just talk about that, and just to talk about those journeys, because I feel like a lot of people, unless they have extreme symptoms, don't tend to really think that IBS, SIBO, Candida overgrowth could be, you know, impacting their regulation, impacting their attention, their energy, just little things like that. And that was it for me. Those were the big things. Like, yes, I would experience, you know, I would get very gassy after some foods, and I would experience like small stomach aches and small discomfort after some foods. Or maybe, you know, if I ate a lot of pasta and queso and lots of dairy, I might be constipated for one day, and it might, you know, just affect my mind. But I never thought it was anything too serious. So I just wanted to get on to talk about that. Maybe we can, you know, continue this discussion, dive in more just about nervous system things, sensory things. I know YouTube isn't my usual platform, so if you don't follow me on Instagram, also recommend following me there. But also subscribe, because this was a lot of fun. I think I want to do some more of these. So let me know what you want to see. Maybe some sensory morning routines, evening routines, a day in the life. But yeah, so let me know what your thoughts are about all of this. If this relates to you, resonates with you at all, if you have any specific questions, maybe we can do a part 2. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you all soon.